Monday to Friday at 12:30 p.m. only on BloombergQuint.
Good morning and happy Friday to you. You're watching All You Need to Know on BloombergQuint Live and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines. The death toll from the coronavirus, or what is now called the COVID-19, has risen to 1,483. The latest updates suggest that the Hubei province added 4,823 new cases on Thursday. Standard & Poor has retained India's sovereign rating at BBB- with a stable outlook, says the country's GDP will recover gradually to longer-term trends in 2 to 3 years. Creditors to Amtek Auto approve a resolution plan from Decoding value investors. Creditors will take a 78% haircut as per the plan. Vodafone Idea has reported a higher than expected loss in the third quarter. The telecom operator has maintained its concern about its ability to continue to remain in business. And Avenue Supermarts will launch its second offer for sale, where promoters will sell up to 2.3% stake. The floor price of 2,049 rupees is a 19% discount to Thursday's close. Let's talk about US markets now. They traded with a negative bias on Thursday, with coronavirus fears keeping investors on edge. Benchmark indices cooled off after scaling new intraday records earlier in the session. All three indices ended with cuts, and Renita Young of Bloomberg News wraps up all of Thursday's Wall Street action in this report.
U.S. stocks closed out Thursday's session lower on renewed concerns about the coronavirus. Officials in China revised the way they count coronavirus cases, so that substantially increased the amount of cases in the area. But the World Health Organization said that some of those cases may actually be a little bit older now. But we're still in the middle of corporate earnings season, believe it or not. One of the latest companies to report was Kraft Heinz, with disappointing sales for the fourth quarter. TripAdvisor, however, had better than expected earnings per share adjusted for the fourth quarter. And MGM Resorts withdrew its 2020 outlook, saying that the coronavirus made things way too unpredictable. Meanwhile, gold was stronger on coronavirus concerns, and WTI crude oil traded higher. That's a look at your Wall Street action on Thursday. In New York, I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
China's Hubei province, which is at the center of the coronavirus outbreak, has reported 116 new deaths and close to 5,000 new cases on Thursday as part of its new methodology. Although the figure is lesser than what the province reported on Wednesday, it is still nearly double than the historical average. Selina Wang and Yvonne Mann of Bloomberg News bring you the latest from Beijing and Hong Kong.
The World Health Organization did say that those cases likely dated back days and weeks before and do not represent this sudden surge into infections. We saw that big spike because China is now adding a large new group of patients that are being diagnosed through CT scans alongside those confirmed by previous methods of nucleic acid testing kits. But health experts have noted some concern over this new methodology, given that it may include patients who have pneumonia but not the coronavirus, and there is a possibility that they may end up in the same hospital wards as people with coronavirus and may be at risk of infection from being in close proximity with them. But that being said, the nucleic acid testing kits have also been shown to not be entirely reliable either, so there's really no perfect scenario here.
And Yvonne, we've now seen another death outside of mainland China, this time in Japan.
Yeah, this is the first death in the country, the third, as you say, outside of China. What we're learning is this was an 80-year-old woman, or in her 80s, I should say, that was living outside of Tokyo in the Kanagawa prefecture. And local reports say that she also is the mother-in-law of a man, a taxi driver, who also tested positive for this coronavirus. What was interesting in this case was she was being treated for a separate condition, and it was only after she died that doctors discovered that she tested positive for the coronavirus. At this point, health officials have not confirmed the relationship between the two cases, but this now brings the total cases in Japan to at least 247, most of which come from the Diamond Princess cruise ship that is held off in Yokohama, where we saw an additional 44 cases just yesterday. And now Japan is letting high-risk people who tested negative off that ship. So anyone who is over 80 years old, anyone who's been living in cabins that don't have windows, and anyone who has underlying conditions can start to get off now.
Selena, when you talk about Alibaba, it's such a bellwether for the Chinese economy, right? What did we hear from that earnings report that should make us concerned about the economy?
Well, they certainly sounded the warning alarms on how this coronavirus is having a fundamental impact on China's economy, as well as its own business. And it said it will likely hurt revenue growth in the current quarter. Many merchants that work with the company haven't been able to return to normal operations because of shortage of employees. Executives also said that this is changing buying patterns, with consumers pulling back on discretionary spending. So even though Alibaba has business lines like food delivery that are growing, clothing, electronics are running into logistical problems, and restaurants and travel bookings have also been hit quite hard. So the company is trying to roll out some measures to temper the negative impact here, including lowering some fees on charges it charges, as well as providing some subsidies for delivery people. But this could have a sizable impact Alibaba's revenue, because you heard management say this is going to hit its retail and local business lines the hardest, which would mean that retail line, revenue line of customer management revenue and commission will likely be hit hardest, which did comprise more than 50% of Alibaba's revenue in the December quarter. So a big impact here for Alibaba.
And Yvonne, not only impact for Alibaba, but cruise operators, just some of those businesses that are struggling to deal with the virus.
Yeah, we have a latest update now on the Aida Vita cruise ship. This is one that is hosting more than 1,100 European passengers right now, have now canceled their plans to dock in Vietnam. This is after the country denied its entry. So once again, another cruise ship that cannot find a place to dock and a destination. It is stuck at sea at the moment. What we're learning so far from local reports there, they are also barring it from allowing passengers to disembark due to fears of the coronavirus. The ship was planned to dock in Ha Long and Da Nang City on February 15th. And this just kind of remember the whole case with the Holland America Westerdam, where it was denied 5 ports of entry. Finally, Cambodia stepped in with a helping hand. So we'll see if any other country takes in this latest cruise ship.
All right, let's see what's making headlines across the globe. Sue Keenan of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
The U.S. Senate, which has voted to restrict President Trump's power to take military action against Iran without approval from Congress. 8 Republicans joined Democrats to pass the resolution by a 55-45 vote. It now heads to the House, where it's expected to be approved. The measure was introduced after President Trump approved the drone strike that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. The president says he will vote, or I should say veto, the resolution. The UK's economic policy, meanwhile, has been thrown into disarray after Sajid Javid quit as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Chancellor, I should say. Javid resigned after refusing Prime Minister Boris Johnson's command to fire all 5 of his most senior Treasury aides. The Prime Minister swiftly appointed Javid's deputy, Rishi Sunak, as the new Chancellor, but his office says it cannot confirm the budget will go ahead as scheduled on March 11th. The U.S., meanwhile, has raised the stakes in its battle with Huawei, alleging the Chinese company engaged in decades of intellectual property theft. The new charges depict a company that won international standing by stealing trade secrets and lying to authorities. Huawei and its CFO are already facing charges of fraud and evading U.S. sanctions on Iran and North Korea. The new charges ratchet up the potential penalties that the company could face if convicted. And the United Nations says more than 140,000 Syrians have been displaced in the last 3 days by violence in the country's northwest. That brings the total number forced to flee a Syrian government offensive to more than 800,000. The UN says at least 60,000 of those displaced are children. The Syrian war is now in its 9th year. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan. This is Bloomberg.
All right, let's take you through the trade setup for the day in India now. Agam Vakil is joining me to tell you all about that and also to tell you what's happening in the futures and options space. Morning, Agam, and welcome back. How are you looking at the end of the week?
Well, Alex, we're likely to see a flattish movement today. SGX Nifty is indicating a marginally positive start, as is evident on your screens. There you have it. Let's move on and talk about your other factors, about how markets have panned out yesterday. So marginal declines for the Nifty, mixed movements for the broader market indices. The banking indices also, well, not showing too much of a movement as such, except for the Nifty Bank, which was down around 0.8%. How are ADRs doing? Right now, there is some amount of negativity, not as much, though that's largely on account of volatility across the globe, and we'll be watching out for, well, some of these names. Dr. Reddy's, of course, in this case stands out, up around 2.5%. But moving on, well, fund flows, FIs bought stock worth around 1,061 odd crores on a net basis, and DI is selling to the tune of 960 odd crores. And coming down to your contributors, we did have a lot of gains in Infosys, SPI, and TCS, which is cancelled out by HDFC, Kotak Mahindra Bank, and ICICI Bank. Coming down to futures and options, now that's where we're watching out for, well, the change in open interest, and we did see a decline of around 1.8% in OI. The Nifty banking futures is looking at shorts building up with a 6% increase in open interest. 500-point range between 12,000 and 12,500 in terms of change in open interest. We are looking at a little more writing around the 12,200 and 12,300 calls. And coming down to the India Volatility Index, well, that is around the mark of 13.4, so not much has changed there. The Nifty put call ratio as well, coming at around 1.48 after hitting the mark of 1.6. Finally, coming down to stocks, what are we watching for? Torrent Power and Torrent Pharma, of course, the Torrent Group companies are looking at good gains coming in, a lot of longs building in. And in terms of stocks which are seeing unwinding, let's pull that list up as well, where we see a decline in open interest, and that list should also come up for you on your screen. And they have it. Mahanagar Gas, PFC, and Ramco Cement in focus at this point in time. Alex, let's just wait and watch as to how indices move from here on.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Agam. All right, let's also take a check on where the bond markets are trading. Remember, they've been in focus since last week's monetary policy. Of course, there was no rate cut, as was broadly estimated and expected by most of the economists polled by Bloomberg. But there was an announcement with regard to easing the liquidity scenario, and that's probably had a bearing. As of yesterday, the 10-year bond yield ended at 6.426, and let's also take a look at the US INR, USD INR. It's also something that has been in focus of late. A lot of foreign institutional inflows coming in, as Agam pointed out today as well. Of course, you have to watch out for several stocks, apart from the ones that Agam pointed out. Nikki Mirchandani is joining me to tell you all about the stocks in news. Nikki, what's on your list today?
Well, a bunch of earnings there. I'm going to start off with BPCL first, which is reported in line with set of estimates numbers. Revenue up by 16%. Profitability too is up by 26.2%, and it's a good show coming in for BPCL. Also, we're looking at a dismal set of numbers coming in from Page Industries. Page Industries has reported a dismal set of numbers. You've seen the volume degrowth coming in from You've seen the volume degrowth coming in by 2.8%, so you expect some amount of disappointment coming in for Page Industries overall. However, I'll throw back to you, Alex, on this one.
We're experiencing a little bit of difficulty on those numbers there, but we'll come back to Nikki on some of the stocks that you have to watch out for in trade today. I was talking about the USD INR. The rupee has been in focus in the recent past. Let's pull that up just so you know where it's heading into trade as of now. Of course, we were talking about the bond yields and where they were trading around that 6.4% mark. The rupee INR, there you have it. So you have the move slightly lower. In fact, the rupee moving in that range, currently trading around 71.3 against the US dollar. Of course, all of that depends on inflows into the currency, into the country. Let's talk about earnings, though. Nestle India's fourth quarter performance managed to meet street estimates. Gross margins were hit due to higher input costs, while other operational parameters were steady. Agam Vakil is back to tell you all about the numbers. Agam?
Well, Alex, we know that Nestle has been an outperformer through and through the year of 2019, and this quarter wasn't any different, considering we are looking at double-digit growth. Well, not near double-digit growth. It's double-digit for the domestic market. So on an overall basis, it's 8.7% growth for the revenues. We've seen net profits rise 38%, and of course, to a certain extent, lower taxation comes into play, besides the fact that they were carrying on a lot of cost efficiencies. Now, that brings me to EBITDA margins, which have expanded to around 21.5% against 19.5%, despite a contraction in gross margins. That said, I'll come down to your top line. We have 10% growth in terms of the domestic sales. That comprises of 94% of the total revenues. It's the exports which did take a hit of nearly 10% on a year-on-year basis. We did see key brands like Maggi, KitKat and Cerelac lead growth. On the other hand, exports were hit because of lower exports towards Turkey. Coming down to margins, well, the company has done substantially to curtail and counter the contraction in gross margins that we have seen, which were down by as much as 220 basis points. And we did see a rise in raw materials costs, largely on account of rise in dairy inputs and sugar prices. Finally, well, in terms of the outlook, the company remains positive, and we're going to have to wait and watch as to whether or not that the company can maintain this growth and outperformance with respect to the rest of the FMCG sector.
Thanks so much for that, Agam. All right, let's stick with earnings now. ONGC is likely to report a weak quarter this time around. A cut in gas prices and the absence of dividend income is likely to impact the operational performance. Darshan Mehta is joining me to tell you all about the key expectations. Darshan, morning.
Yeah, good morning. So it'll be slightly weak. Revenues down 2%. EBITDA is seen down almost 9%, which means EBITDA margins will come down from close to 55% to 50%. And on the profit front, we are seeing profits come down to almost by 16%. And that too on the lack of dividend income, which was there in the last quarter. Now, in terms of what the realizations were, we are expecting some bit of uptick from 60.3 to 61.6% is something that we are anticipating. Some of the key factors that we need to watch out for, there was low gas price this time around and higher depreciation. So both these factors will impact the bottom line for the company. Gas prices were also cut by close to 12%, and that too will have an impact on the numbers, the financial numbers. Absence of dividend income, which was there, almost 1,600 crores of dividend income came in the second quarter. That won't be there in the third quarter, so there will be a drop that we are seeing. As far as crude production is concerned, that has been flat. Crude sales has also been flat at almost 5.5 MT. As far as gas production is concerned, that is down 1.6%. Gas sales is down 2.4%. Some important things that we need to watch out for: the guidance on oil and gas production for FY21. ONGC Videsh, which is the international and overseas subsidiary of the company, what is their earnings and outlook? And finally, current state of the KG-DWN in 98 and what's the kind of development that's happening there.
All right, thanks so much for that, Darshan. Now, I do want to point out that we had a bit of an issue with regard to the stocks in news that you normally watch on this program. You'll find all of those stocks, though, on the website, BloombergQuint.com, in a story by a similar name. So you'll find it on the website. You'll also find a lot of the information that we talked about in this program on all you need to know on the website, BloombergQuint.com. And not just that, of course, you'll find all the live trading action right here on BloombergQuint. Thanks so much for watching. Have a nice day.